Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here, and today's video we're going to go over how crafting works now in Frozen Canvas. We're going to cover everything from the basics to the end game and try to cover over how to get some tips and tricks to make yourself a little bit of better gear for cheaper currency cost. And I think there's a lot of pitfalls that people are kind of falling into, making things a lot more expensive for them to craft. And we'll show you how to do everything from the beginning to crafting yourself some nice end game gear that looks like this. Now, starting off, in order to craft an item, pretty much all you have to do is click on it. And then you'll be able to see like the item level of the item, which is important. But then we're just going to click this anvil sign right here. Now, this lets us see how many prefixes and suffixes it has. And once gear gets to a certain level, it will just always have 3 prefixes and suffixes. And these are basically different types of stats that can roll on the items. So you can think of affixes as either a prefix or a suffix, and they have their own categories. And on top of that, there are 3 additional categories: basic, advanced, and ultimate. And these get more and more expensive to craft. So the basic ones are pretty basic. The advanced ones are a little bit more expensive. In this case, 3 times more expensive. And then ultimate affixes can only be placed on priceless gear, which is only found kind of in the very late end game, is always going to be item level 100. And yeah, it's very, very, very expensive to craft these items. Now, starting off here, if I wanted to craft an item, you can see right away what the different options are for this slot. So I can see here the gear physical damage could potentially roll into any of these options, with the exception of the lightning damage, since that's already on the gear. Also, if I click on this little eye here, it'll show me all of the options, even stuff that this particular piece of gear does not qualify for. I get the information so I can see all the future tiers, what the level breakpoint is for these, and the probability of hitting these. This just gives you a lot of information as to kind of what to expect for your gear. Now, I really do recommend for early game gear that you eventually get yourself up to something that is between 82 and 85 so that you can get these tier 2 modifiers. And the reason for that is because the price for crafting goes up and up the higher an item level gets. So as we can see here, this now costs precious embers, which are a little bit more expensive than the other embers we were looking at. However, if we go up from 85 to something that's like 89 here, we can see that just crafting costs flame elementium and precious ember. So it cost me 10 precious and a flame elementium, whereas this item here would cost me 5 flame sand and 1 precious ember. So quite a bit cheaper, since flame sand is basically free at this point in the game. Especially like early game, you're going to get a ton of flame sand. As you can see right now, after destroying stacks and stacks and stacks of this, I have like 24,000 of it. So it's quite, profoundly available. Now, when we're looking to craft an item, the first thing that I always do is I just go and I look at what the options are. And I try to think to myself, what are my top 3 prefixes, my top 3 suffixes? But most importantly than that is figuring out what my number 1 and 2 advanced affixes are. This is important because an item can only have 2 advanced affixes, and eventually it can only have 2 ultimate affixes. And that includes prefix or suffix. So we can see here that things like dexterity is an advanced affix, intelligence, strength, block ratio, converts physical, all these things are advanced affixes. And if I go craft one on here and confirm it, it will prevent me from crafting another advanced affix because we already have 2 on there. And this is pretty important to know because if I, for example, wanted to get like intelligence on my gear, there's some ways to actually make this crafting process a lot simpler. One, if I was going to go and like buy this piece of gear, and before you start crafting stuff that can get tier 1, I probably wouldn't recommend going out and like purchasing a piece of gear because it's really, really, really easy to craft it for yourself. But if I'm going to go and purchase something, I always look for something that has at least 1, maybe 2 of the advanced affixes that I am searching for, and just kind of compare and contrast the cost between something that already comes preloaded with one of the advanced affixes and one of them that does not. Because the cost to craft this is quite a bit higher. It's going to cost more embers or fancier embers and more sand. we can see here we're going from 5 flame sand and 1 precious to 15 flame sand and 1 matchless. And so that just makes things more expensive. Now, something I showed real quick here is that when you craft stuff, it shows you the before and the after and the damage and survivability numbers. These numbers can be a little bit funky sometimes, so don't necessarily always, take them directly at their word. However, if you want, you can craft again from this screen by clicking the craft again, and this will discard the result that you just got, and you can just continuously spam this until your heart's content or you run out of materials. If you click the confirm button over here on the left one will make it so that you cancel crafting, you don't accept the change. However, if you click the one over here on the right, it says, I want to keep this, and so it will keep that. And this is just pretty useful just for like kind of fishing for the crafts you want. Now, when you are doing stuff like this tier 2 capped gear, there's like pretty an easy way to do crafting though as well. So let's say that I really want to get on here like tier 2 dexterity and maybe physical damage taken converted to fire damage, or maybe projectile speed. Either of these, this doesn't really matter for example. But if I want to get dexterity, what I should do first is I should put 2 advanced affixes on this piece of gear. And the reason I do this is because it reduces the odds of me getting like, it allows me to block one of the options. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, we hit the thing we wanted. Let's pretend that we actually want projectile speed. So if we want projectile speed here, now when I'm rolling this spot, I can only get, I can't get physical damage taken as fire damage anymore. I can get dexterity or I can hit projectile speed, but this blocks out one of the things that I don't want. And this allows me to kind of save some currency doing that. And so I can continuously click here all day and just allow it to kind of keep going. But, maybe your hands get tired of this, so we can take advantage of auto crafting. Now, auto crafting is a new feature. And after activating auto crafting, you set the targets here for the affixes that might appear. You can click craft to keep crafting automatically until an affix appears that meets your requirements. You can also stop the auto crafting at any time by clicking the stop button. So I'm going to click this little button right here, and then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go tier 2 on dexterity. There's a little drop down right here. You can kind of see this a little bit more clearly above my head. And then we're going to go here to projectile speed and go tier 2 as well. Now, if you are just looking to get this on your gear at the first place, you could potentially do like tier 4. Yeah, let's just do tier 4s instead. And then we're going to click start auto crafting. And there we go. We got the result that we wanted, tier 2 right away on the first time. And now we can go and auto craft for projectile speed in this spot. Now we only can have 2 advanced affixes, and so we can't like block this a second time, but we can just auto craft like this. And then we can, so we could continuously craft more after that if we wanted to. We want to raise this tier up to tier 2. That would work. But then we're going to go down to basic crafting. I'm going to turn off auto crafting here. Actually, I'm going to keep auto crafting on, and we're just going to go look for max life. I could like put tier 3, could put tier 2 here. I don't think it really matters. And this is like a pretty good way to just like kind of get the stuff done really quickly. Now, the one thing I will note though, is let's pretend, for example, that we have tier 3 life on the gear. Tier 3 life here, as we can see both here, 92 to 110, or on this screen, 92 to 110. This is the reroll the stats in your gear. I can see that like this is not necessarily a high roll. And so what I would recommend doing in this case is just, if I don't have a lot of currency, I can't afford to just spam it all day, is I will just manually craft it. And if I happen to get lucky and I hit max life again that has a higher roll, I will just keep it myself. And I don't think that right now the auto crafting will take better rolls. So we can see here, we got like 108. So just keep that roll and then we'll just roll it some more. Now, if the roll is pretty high in the first place, auto crafting is probably the way to go. So you can just go back here, auto craft tier 2, and just blast through really, really quickly. And this is just really the best way to craft yourself some really good early game gear. This is really what you should be looking for towards the end of mid game. So for the most part, you want all of your gear to be perfect, all tier 2, and you want like the 2 advanced affixes that you want, and then you want the 4 remaining basic affixes, all tier 2 out of your mind. And then you can also Truth Ember if the rolls on here are kind of low. What this will do is it'll re-roll the ranges within the same range. So this like cold resistance here will go from 9 to 11. And this doesn't have a like decline option. Whatever you roll into is what you roll into. So you want to be really careful with things that like have I would say a wide volatility. And one of the things that I do, especially for gear like weapon or something where it's not really clear for me whether or not something is an upgrade, is I will just take it off of my character and typically try to put another piece of gear in that like replaces the energy. But like for on this weapon, for example, I can see that this has a negative 46% damage modifier right now. And if I was rolling this, I could potentially see what the differences are after I craft this. So I can see this went from 46 to 48. And let's try to keep in mind that I want to get this number as high as possible. This is just a generic thing. There are definitely things that you like need to keep in mind. Some things like skill levels could be really important. And this staff in general is being very stubborn and isn't crafting for us. But that's pretty much the end of the early game crafting. So let's move into mid game crafting. So mid game crafting is going to be a little bit different, where we are now going to be using items that have a level of 89 or 86 and above. And we still basically the same thing, have advanced affixes. However, tier 1 affixes are a very large step up in the damage department, especially on things like weapons. I would say that like one of the big mistakes I see players make is I look at their gear and I look at their like weapon in particular, and they are still using all tier 2, whereas tier 1 modifiers are like 50% bigger in terms of providing damage. And so having 6 stats that are 50% bigger is a lot bigger weapon. Very, very important to pop yourself up and get a better weapon pretty much as soon as you can, going from a tier 2 up to a tier 1. It's just kind of important to note that it costs quite a bit more. So like a two-hander, it'll cost you 2 flame elementium per swing at these basic affixes. Advanced affixes are going to cost you 6 FE, and then we can't do ultimate on this. Now, if this was a one-hander weapon or like a normal piece of armor, it would be 3 FE for the advanced and then 1 FE for the basic. But if we go and look here, we can see that hitting tier 1 has a 33% probability, which means that it is very unlikely, or 3.33% chance to hit, which means that it is relatively unlikely for this to happen. So for example, if I go use this little calculator tool here, so if a probability of something is 3.33%, the probability of it never occurring after doing, let's say 40 times is not all that high, still 25% of the time. But if we're only at 20, we can see that that's really just a 50-50. And so hitting some of these tier 1s can be quite difficult to do. And so one of the things I would recommend doing is if I was going to go look for a centaur staff today, the things that I would look for would be making sure that this has at least one of the advanced affixes that I want. So we can go here and we can go like 99, and then we can go to intelligence, and I can search for any range here in the tier 1 range. And so we can see that getting something like a base here that has intelligence on it already is going to be quite a bit cheaper than, you know, buying a completed staff. And like some of these are actually pretty darn nice. However, if if I like especially was looking for something that was off meta, the difference between like this is going to save me a ton of money, right? This is going to save me like it would take me about 60 FE on average to hit an advanced affix on a two-handed weapon. And so by getting it cheaper from purchasing it directly saves me quite a bit of money. I could also go and just figure out like, what are the other advanced affixes I want? Ooh, main skill level. I see a lot of people making a mistake here with main skill level where they will look for things that are only 4. And so if I look for ones that have level 4 on them, and let's also random affixes, let's say the most here is going to be 4. So we're looking for ones that aren't actually crafted. So ones here that are, leveled up, lots of times this will be quite expensive. This has actually kind of died down a little bit now, I guess, as people figured out crafting. But there's no inherent value in it being level 4 compared to it just being any value, or not any value. It needs to be between the tier 1 range of 2 to 4. And so we can still roll these ones that are main skill level 3 into another one. And so what I would do is I would look for weapons here that have tier 1 intelligence and tier 1 main skill. And this is going to save me a tremendous amount of currency purchasing one like this, because hitting these 2 advanced affixes on average is going to cost me about 60 FE, which we showed by the calculator there. Sometimes more, sometimes a lot less, depending on your RNG. And so you kind of want to do those type of purchases where you're focusing on your advanced affixes and then kind of crafting them in. You still want to do all of the same steps here of going and blocking advanced affixes if you are crafting from scratch, but I'd highly recommend just buying gear that has at least 1, maybe 2 of the advanced affixes. And that's pretty much it for the kind of middle game crafting. Next up, let's talk about priceless crafting. So once items get to be level 100, they are priceless. And this kind of rarely happens. Kind of like there's some stuff on the tree that you can invest into. There's a whole bunch of like mechanics. So like God of Might, God of Machines both have a bunch of like increased drop quantity and like make it a little bit easier for you to drop priceless gear. But it's still pretty rare to get the good gear. And this will now have base affixes. And so if we're going back here and looking at item level 100 staffs, I'm going to I'm just going to hide ones that are crafted up. Just put like 4 as the cap here. So we can see here that this staff, for example, has physical damage to spells, and this is just a base stat. This is not something that is a roll, and we can tell the difference because there are these horizontal lines between them. So we have kind of the implicit stat of spell damage, and then we have the base stat of fire damage, and then the actual rolled prefix and suffix below that. If you're looking for particular ones, you can type base here, and you could do base affixes and all these things. If there's a wide variety of things you want, you can click condition group here at the bottom, and you can type in a whole bunch of different conditions that might be good for you. Make sure this is checked off, and then search results contain one of the condition group. And so now we're searching for staffs here. They're always going to have one of the things that is potentially good for me. And I could even go into here and make sure that these are always top rolled. So I'm getting the very best options available to me, because I wouldn't want to buy something that is not maxed out, particularly because I just like kind of starting off with nice gear. Sometimes you can get stuff cheaper that has a little bit lower roll range. And so we can just kind of see here all of the different options. Now, priceless gear itself is very, very expensive. Some of the good bases are going to cost you quite a bit. So for example, my staff here, I had additional damage while channeling. The price of these, I want to make sure it's on a centaur staff because this is like the base that I would want. And so getting something like this is probably going to cost me, like 1600, 1500 FE. I could take off some of these like that. But let's say, for example, that I really just wanted max focus blessing. There's no staffs like that right now because this is, I think, the best option. And so that is just something that just doesn't exist anymore. So anytime those come up, those get purchased out. But we can see that some of the options are relatively cheap, like added cold damage and stuff. And the reason these are cheap is because these just provide less damage than having another multiplicative on it. So since the base is so expensive, we want to make sure that that we're investing in something really good, that we're going to be happy with crafting up. And then we're just going to go and hit stuff with it. Now, when we're looking at this, a lot of people here are going to maybe make a mistake of not starting with the ultimate affix. So just like previously, you have advanced affixes and basic affixes, but you also have ultimate affixes. And ultimate affixes are going to be very, very, very expensive to craft. So we see here on this two-handed staff, it's going to be 60 FE per attempt, and it is going to also cost me 2 ultimate embers, which right now vary between 20 to 25 FE. So that could be like 110 FE per attempt. And I need to hit tier 1 here, and this is going to be a 5% chance. So at 5% chance, if I try, I think it's probably going to be like 15. I think it's going to take, to get an average chance here, about 14 times. So just to be 50-50, it'd be a coin flip. And if I wanted to do like 20 times, there's still a 35% chance that this craft is not going to happen. So yeah, these can cost quite a bit. Like if we're looking at 60 plus 50 FE times 20 times, you can see why my staff doesn't have any of the tier 1s that I want here. And this makes blocking your ultimate affix pretty important here. So this additional damage to life is not one of the ultimates that I want. I want to get spell skill level tier 1 here. And so we're just going to keep rolling on this until we hit, and then we will roll off the additional damage and put our spell critical strike damage probably on the suffix. I'm not 100% sure exactly what we're doing there yet, but I know for sure that I want spell skill level. And then for advanced, I'm going to be looking for intelligence and main skill level in the prefixes. And then the suffixes are probably going to be things like spell damage or elemental damage and cast speed. Now, once you have something at tier 1, what you can do is you can upgrade it to tier 0. So you can see here that this ring, for example, has several tier 0 modifiers. And a tier 1 mod here, you can upgrade this to tier 0 by expending currency. This is a 30% chance to work. It's going to cost you 30 FE, one of these sacred fossils, and looks like 300 precious embers, because I'm pretty sure that this is an advanced affix. No, this is a basic affix. So even just upgrading a basic affix is going to be quite expensive here. Now the sacred fossils, the price of these have kind of gone all over the place. We can go look here real quick. The price check for this coming out like 4 FE. So this is really not all that bad right now to upgrade this, but this says 30%. And let me tell you, lots of times I hit this and it feels a lot more like 10%. However, that's kind of just human brain being bad at probability here. So if I was to hit this, like 5, let's say we were to hit this 2 times, this should work like on average a coin flip every 2 times, but lots of times it doesn't. But let's just hit it. Didn't work. And then it worked the second time. So there's our coin flip right there, which is just, nice. Now the higher level affixes do cost more to get going and to get up, and they will additionally have more stuff on them. And it's kind of difficult to see what these affixes have, because even if I click here, it doesn't show me the tier 0. And so you kind of have to, like, if you're looking at somebody's gear, you see max focus blessing stacks +1 and additional damage. You kind of have to know that that pairs with the max focus blessing on there. And the only way you can really see the tier 0 is by either going to the upgrade thing or going over to corrosion with the item. So if I take this item over here, this is the corrosion bench. And corrosion is something that you really probably should not do for normal gear. This is more like how you edit legendary gear in terms of legendary crafting stuff here, because legendaries also have crafting. These don't have the little anvil for crafting, and really kind of what you're looking for here is to use the corroded guy. Now, if you're going to craft, if you're going to corrode just like a basic starter legendary, you can do the normal corrosion, which is the base one that you're picking here. And this will give you the options of mutation, chaos, arrogance, and void, but desecration will be locked away. But if you click this purple button here, desecration will become available. And this, has some really good stuff. So let's just put something in here real quick, just to kind of show the options. I'm not necessarily going to corrode this, but we can show you what things do. So 30% of the time, I'm going to hit mutation. And what this is going to do is it will remove all base affixes. So if this is a priceless piece of gear, it would remove the base affix, and then it would add a corroded base affix on it, and it makes the gear corroded, and it binds it to me so I can no longer trade it with other people. So some of these are like max agility blessings, cooldown recovery, and you can see the weightings for these, right? So if I was to corrode these, I'd very likely get regenerates mana per second while moving. Now, the second option here, which also happens 30% of the time, is it re-rolls the random values of all prefixes and suffixes, makes the gear corroded, and binds the gear. Now, this does not change the tier, but this basically just randomizes the roll, like as if you use a truth ember on it. This is considered the worst option, because if you're corroding something, normally it's going to have good rolls, and chaos is just probably going to make those rolls bad, unless you have a really good RNG seed. So that's pretty bad. Next up is desecration and arrogance. This happens 15% of the time for each of them on the darkest corrosion. And then if we're looking at regular corrosion, it will never happen. And arrogance instead will get that additional 15% chance, which is pretty nice. And what this does is this will take 2 prefixes or suffixes and upgrades the tier by 1 to 2. And it will turn the gear corroded, and it will not bind the gear. So we will be allowed to trade this. And so desecration does 2 of them, arrogance does 1, and this is what we're looking for. And so this will take the affixes on legendary gear or even on rare gear and take it up 1 tier. So some of these are really, really nice. So I go from like 1 to 2 projectile skill up to 3, movement speed, yada, yada, yada. And you can, yes, put legendary, non-legendary gear here as well, and we can kind of see the options. So we can see that things can go from like tier 2 to tier 1 or even to tier 0 plus. I think it always skips tier 0 and takes it immediately up to tier 0 plus. And some of these are going to be incredibly high numbers, which I think is pretty neat. And so like 9 skill levels is quite powerful. This just gives you like a lot of damage right up in the front, which is pretty nice. And yeah, this is something that like you really only want to do when it like you don't really want to do it to your non-legendary gear all that much, because you're kind of like risking a lot, especially if you like you're kind of not able to do anything at that point with it. It is corroded. It can't be crafted anymore. And if you like accidentally roll it into different stats, you pretty much have to like not different stats, but different values. You might even have to like start again. And crafting a good thing like this could be quite expensive. And also, if you don't hit one of the 30% options to either desecrate or arrogance, it is not going to be tradable anymore. And so if you decide to roll to a new piece of gear or just change your build or anything, you're not going to be able to do it. And so it kind of eliminates that money from your character, which is pretty scary. Now, the last piece of crafting, 2 last things of crafting we're going to talk about is one is gear empowerment here. So gear empowerment is pretty much the energy that the gear has, and this will re-roll the amount of energy completely randomly. I don't believe that there's any weighting for this, and it consumes a certain amount of energy cores. Now, stuff that is lower item level will have less energy core cost in order to roll. And so we can see here that this like very low item level gear has only 4, whereas our like priceless piece of gear here is 20 for a 2-hander, or like for this hat was 20 as well. And so the higher level it goes, the more expensive it gets, which is kind of annoying. But this is really important if you want to max out your energy for your character here. I believe that 530 is the cap. You get more points when you level, but you also get more from your gear. Lastly, I did a whole video talking about dream interpretation, but this is a system It allows you to add dream base affixes to gear, like this triggers elemental destruction curse up here. This is pretty important to do. This gives you quite a bit of power. Things like this curse here is a huge boost for me. Additional spell damage, huge boost. And then this one over here kind of sucks right now, but I don't have any of the resources to roll it. So I'll just show you an example on a lower piece of gear. Now armor especially is relatively cheap to do because the resources for it are pretty cheap. These are the shallow dream talking armor. Each type of gear has its own shallow dream talking. So like weapons, trinkets, or armor. And we can get a whole bunch of different results here. So like armor, life, all this stuff here. The happy dream is pretty common. The lucky dream is less common. Confusing dream is even less common. And then I don't think things have auspicious dream anymore. And when you click the button, it's going to give us a result. And if I click record, it will basically guarantee craft this onto the gear, but it'll also have a negative that we can't control either. But if I click abandon, it's going to give me this pop-up here. I'm going to always click do not show, and we just go back to the craft window. We click it again. Let's say, oh yes, armor is what I was looking for. And so now it's going to give me more armor, less max energy shield. Cool. Now this is a dream crafted piece of gear. I can even see the negatives in advance if I want to click over here. You can see all of the different things that can get. So there's some very significant negatives that you can get. But let's say I want to undo this. Right behind my head here, there's a button that will allow me to put a dream piece of gear in and rewind it. And it just removes the dream stuff, but it does cost materials. And so you just roll it back. Now it's important to note that you can only have 3 dream pieces of gear at a time. And so if I try to like equip this hat, it's going to tell me that the maximum number of dream gear has been equipped. And so we can't go and put on a 4th piece of gear. Also, you can't dream craft on legendaries, but as you can see, we can like dream craft on some pretty low item level stuff. And so especially if you're just getting started out, some of these options are going to be pretty powerful for you. And like things like dream crafting armor are like super duper cheap. So you could potentially buy like 10 of these to like juice up your armor a little bit and give yourself a little more power. And you could always just throw stuff in there to preview. But yeah, that's pretty much it for crafting with all of the vendors here. I guess we'll just throw in one little extra here, how skill advancement works. I had a lot of questions about this. So skills that are the special new skills don't have the traditional leveling where you go and just kill mobs and it fills up the XP pool. Instead, you need to sacrifice supports of the exact same type to fill up the meter here. And then the ones here for that are like tier 2, we're just going to give you +2. Tier 1 ones give you +5. I'm not sure how much a 0 gives, but that meter does go up and up and up in terms of how much it is going to cost to fill it up over time, or as you level it up. So if I wanted to do like a tier 1 to 2, it only costs me 5 resources, whereas a tier 2 or level 2 to 3 is 10. And then I haven't leveled up anything past that point because I'm playing Icebound Beam and it's very expensive. But yeah, that is pretty much it for crafting. Hopefully this video helped you out a little bit, gave you some tips and tricks. Just remember that like getting yourself a full tier 2 piece of gear early game is pretty good. When you're looking to go up to an I-86 or above piece of gear, buying something that has your advanced affixes on it already is probably going to save you quite a big amount of headache of crafting. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, when you're crafting stuff with especially advanced or ultimate affixes, you can put one on there and then try to basically block that. So for this particular weapon here, right now with the spell skill level, since I have additional damage applied to life, I can't roll that again. So just every time I roll this, it is going to give me something random here. And here, I'll just show you an example of how this works for the video, because, we always get rather lucky when we're crafting. So as you can see here, these ultimate embers are pretty expensive right now, almost up to 30 FE. And lots of times these are a little bit difficult to buy in a non-bulk sense. So I'm just going to buy one here for 34 FE. So this particular attempt on the staff is going to cost me 2 of them. So that's about 70 plus another 60. So 130 FE. So it's very, very easy to waste a lot of money. Get spell skill level 1 here. And well, unfortunate, it didn't happen this time. But maybe in the next video, we'll see a nice leveled up staff. Or maybe I'm just going to buy one at this point. This priceless crafting is very expensive. Hopefully this video helps you out. We'll see you again soon. Come with the stream.